Let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
This is 45 years they've been in power. They've never been so significantly weakened politically, economically, which a lot of this is about in terms of the demonstrations, and also militarily. And they are truly back on their heels.
That is General Jack Keane. He was ebullient this morning talking about what could be changing in real time and how brilliant the military was in their action in Venezuela and the message as it's interpreted by our enemies.
Number 2.
I could come up with unemployment or employment numbers that are so good. Fellas, hire 2 million people right now. But you can't make our country great that way. That's how you go into trouble. That's how you become Venezuela.
That is true. Economy on President's mind as we digest the new job numbers and plans unveiled to juice the housing market in our nation.
Number 1.
Nobody wants an American citizen to be killed. This is absolutely a tragedy. It's a tragedy of the making of the far left. They have radicalized a very small segment of the population, taught them that ICE agents are engaging in wide-scale violation of people's rights.
ICE under attack as the left-wing cities make law enforcement the enemy again on another ICE-related shooting. Shows over in Portland that these irresponsible Democrats have done nothing but incite their radical base. We have details on the fallout in Minnesota, Portland, and where ICE goes from here. And that is when they hit turbulence, they double and triple down. But let's talk about the world stage. Let's bring in Seth Krummrich. Seth is kind enough to join us, retired Army colonel. Seth, welcome.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be here today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, for people like you and me, and like who love foreign policy, for people that do this, there is so much change afoot. Hard to know where to start, but can we begin in Venezuela? I think I have not met a military person that wasn't in awe of the execution, but the message sent in taking Maduro out of his bed with his wife and not staying on the ground. Your thoughts about what it means?
So you've hit it right on the head. This is about Venezuela, but it's really about how we message the world. And if I had to frame this current U.S. administration, it's one of decisive action, whether it's a peace deal or whether it's military force. An absolute resolve, the mission to capture Maduro, is a perfect example of us enforcing our laws and our influence globally. And when we negotiate or we deal with other countries, it has to be from a position of strength. And absolute resolve really is that muscle behind our diplomacy that says, look, we're not just threatening, something that might not happen. We mean what we say. So yes, to your point, tactically, the mission was exquisite. Delta Force, JSOC, no one does it better than they do. But really that political will to do it is one of the key indicators and changes with this administration. They were willing to do it. But make no mistake, if you visualize, think of the world map and think of it as like a still pond. We just threw a big strategic rock at Venezuela, and those ripples now are going out across the world, and they have strategic implications with our allies, our adversaries, and our competitors. But for our enemies and competitors around the world, this was a massive wake-up call. I've never seen a single mission have such an impact to everybody. It's completely changing their strategic calculus on how they approach the United States and where they think they're going from here. But it was stunning in its ability.
So, Colonel, so we know Iraq, the invasion was fantastic, the Thunder Run and everything like that to take out Saddam Hussein. And the reason we do that in Iraq, people were all over Bush 41 for not finishing it off and taking Baghdad. Bush 43 comes in and takes Baghdad. They go, why didn't you do what your dad did? Now everyone wants a Monday morning quarterback. I get it. But one thing we didn't want is we could have planned, no one argues, better for the day after the invasion. So next thing you know, we have to handle paying of municipalities, picking up the trash and taking over the infrastructure. Trump says, no, leave these guys, as evil as they are, let them do it. We're going to have the threat of another attack on the outside, and we're going to use as leverage oil. I mean, I wasn't even thinking this. How do you feel about how this post-invasion, post-taking of Maduro plan is working out?
So to your point, there's been a lot of opinions out there, and primarily from folks such as myself, who has a deep Middle Eastern background as a special forces officer that worked there for decades. But Secretary Rubio said something really interesting recently, that, hey, be really careful about comparing the Middle East and its identity and culture to Latin America and to Venezuela. They're very different. And to your point, that means the approaches can be very different. So I think in this case, I think it's a very interesting and I think it's a very powerful approach of let's try this method because we know it doesn't work. And we have a very good understanding of our neighbors to the south, what they're culturally like, what we think they're willing to accept. And this is I think, the more practical approach. Let's see President Rodriguez. Let's see if she can keep her interior minister and her defense minister in line. Let's see if she will comply with U.S. directives and then, which equals progress. And what I would tell everybody out there, this is what I tell my clients all the time that work in the region, it's you have to watch for improved social services. Are the law and order functionalities in the interior minister changing to help pick up the garbage, to your point, to run schools and healthcare? Are we seeing the oil program begin to integrate with U.S. companies? Are we seeing discussions on election scheduling? Are we seeing the U.S. easing sanctions? For us, I'll tell you, for national security guys, are we off-ramping those close ties with China, Russia, and Iran, that winding down that was mentioned recently? And also things like yesterday, we saw the prisoner releases. It's all progress, but make no mistake, trust has to be earned every single day. Our intelligence community will be deep watching the situation unfold, listening to phone calls, watching action. That's going to help inform the Trump administration on how we drive the next steps and how we engage with President Rodriguez.
We're talking to Seth Krummrich. He's the vice president of Global Guardian, the retired colonel. So, Colonel, a couple of things is pretty clear. The president's going to meet with Maria Machado, who was the one whose party won the last election. And that's good, next week. But I think the CIA probably told him, look, if she comes in here, she doesn't have the military. And these guys are not going to just go away. There could end up being a guerrilla situation. We're going to have a presence on the ground. So that's probably what she is going to be told by the president. What would you tell her?
So I think you have to be truthful. Hey, this is why I chose this approach. It's based off of experience. We've learned the hard way of what doesn't work. If we want to be successful and take care of the Venezuelan people, this is the approach that we assess gives us the best chance to be able to shift behavior to, in the long term, help the Venezuelan people, in the long term, get to elections, and in the long term, to Machado, give you the best opportunity to be an influential person in Venezuela. It would be unfair to her to put her in power right now, to your point, and then have everything collapse around her and be total chaos, because then she loses her value to the people, and we can't afford that. And because it's beyond Venezuela, it's Colombia, it's Brazil, it's all of the neighbors, it's the entire Western Hemisphere, everything the national security strategy outlined.
Right. So you think elections in 6 months, 9 months, a year?
So this is one of my favorite topics. It has to be conditions based. If we were to come in and put a timeline down and say, you have to hold to this timeline, we're setting ourselves up for failure. I use the botched Afghan withdrawal debacle. We put this, intractable timeline in, and it was a complete disaster. This has to be conditions based, like Gaza. Hey, these things have to be met in phase one, before we go to phase two. We have to have some flexibility. I love the idealistic thoughts on how we can take care of Venezuela, but the reality is we have to be practical and realistic of what's actually achievable. The bottom line is this: if we know what the outcome is, what we want to achieve in the long term with Venezuela, then we do everything else conditions-based to eventually get us to that, like curling. We're sort of moving the rock down the ice to get it exactly where we want to be, and it's going to be subtle steps along the way.
So here's General Jack Keane with me this morning talking about what it's going to be like with the impact and the need for these oil executives to get on board today as they meet with the president. Cut 38.
Well, I think this is about economic recovery of the country. And obviously, this was the richest country and most prosperous, 27 years ago, before Chavez, prior to Maduro, got his hands on it and crippled the economy. But it's going to take some doing, to rebuild that industry. But it is their major source of revenue. And I think getting started with economic recovery makes a lot of sense because it adds to the stability of the country.
So he wants these oil executives put in like over $50 billion to start modernizing their pipelines and their platforms.
Yeah, look, he's 100% correct. It's sort of the rising tide lifts all boats. If the economy can get turbocharged by updating all of their equipment and production and raise the level of what they're able to do there, then that will directly benefit everyone in Venezuela and, frankly, the Western Hemisphere. But make no mistake, there's a lot of work, as General Keane noted. So in my job every day, I work with oil and gas executives. I have teams in Caracas and in Venezuela that are helping inform me to give them the right advice of when to go in, how we're going to protect them, because we have to get those oil executives in to start the assessment process so they can truly understand how big this is going to be of a project, how long it's going to take, how expensive it's going to be. But we also have to be able to protect them during this time period. So this is an ongoing conversation I'm having like every hour of the
Colonel,
day.
what is it like there? I mean, right now, if you were to put in your friends to go work on the Chevron with Chevron, what would you tell them the risk is?
So I'll tell you what the risk is and how you mitigate the risk.
Okay.
So the risk is, hey, look, it is uncertain. There's a lot of tense unknowns that are happening there. When I talk to those teams on the ground and our intelligence teams at Global Guardian, this is a period of turbulence and flux between leaderships. We don't know exactly how things are going to go over the next 6 months. But let's say my oil executives had to go in. Here's the beauty of this. This company was built by Green Berets. We do everything by, with, and through our indigenous counterparts. So we have awesome Venezuelan security teams that are there that we vest and we test to make sure they're above board. They're incredible. My guys show up, we meet them plainside. We're doing executive protection, secure transportation with them the entire time. They're able to get the assessment. So from that particular piece, I can guarantee their safety, and also I can make sure that if anything happens, I can get them out of country. For example, before the sun came up on Saturday, our Venezuelan team already had all the evacuation routes that we needed to get any of our clients or employees or families out of Venezuela. Couldn't go by air, couldn't go by sea, but we had all of the routes out by ground of how we were going to evacuate our clients. So all of that was happening real time. That's how fast we moved. It's incredible. So I can absolutely support those folks coming in, but that's very granular. Until the oil comes up is going to be the danger zone. Until we can get that rising tide to start moving up, there's going to be all those tough pieces we mentioned before, picking up the garbage, educating the kids, all of the things that can make a society either improve or dissolve.
Right.
And that's going to be the piece we have to watch.
Oh, the thing is, they're used to terrible conditions, sadly, because of their leadership and their communism. So now we have Brazil's leader come out and say, hey, you know that 27-year prison sentence for Bolsonaro, which, by the way, word is he really won the election last time. It's now down to 2. Remember, that's what President Trump asked. And then that Colombia belligerent, unhinged leader of Colombia, he called while the New York Times was in the Oval Office and said, can we talk? They spoke for an hour, and he's going to come to the White House. Pretty amazing change of attitude.
It's incredible. And again, it goes back to that strategic impact of what this mission did. And you're seeing this across the board in real time. Everyone is changing their calculus. Iran, Colombia, Cuba, even the Greenland discussion, like all of these things are tied together. So when I talk to my clients around the world globally, this mission and the impact of Venezuela is frankly affecting how we're looking at risk in China, Russia, Middle East, Central America. It's incredible. I've never seen another mission like this. Not the UBL raid, not the Saddam Hussein capture. This is really exquisite times.
Right. That's why it's important. It goes real quick. Lastly, I love the fact that the Russians told us not to take that tanker, and we took it. I love that message.
There is when you're in negotiations, there's 2 types of militaries. There's a parade military that threatens things, and then there's, call it a potential, military. Then there's a kinetic, a military that actually does things, that's proven. If we've learned anything over the last 20 years, the U.S. does decisive action. Our military is the best, and no one's even close. Conversely, we learned that Russia can't even invade across its own border without creating an absolute catastrophe for itself that, frankly, could be an existential threat for its own country. And when you look at now the diplomatic world we live in, we have the upper hand because we are competing and we're in diplomacy from a position of strength. And if you look at some of the new messages of we're going to raise the military budget by 50%, hey, we're now reinforcing it. As much as that sounds awesome for the Department of War, the diplomats are going to love it even more.
1.5 trillion from 950 billion, but it's still less percentage than Reagan had. Seth Krummrich, retired Army colonel, vice president, international security firm, a Global Guardian with a special expertise in the region. Thanks so much, Colonel. Exciting times.
It was my pleasure. Really appreciated talking to you today and your entire audience.
All right, you got it. Back in a moment. Joining us now is Josh Kraushaar, talking about the fallout from Wednesday's shooting. And then last night, there was a shooting over in Portland, Josh.
Yeah, Brian, it's been a very serious tinderbox across Minneapolis, and there's a fear that it could spread. The disruption and chaos could spread to other cities across the country. We're learning more about the Portland, Oregon, shooting. But no, Minneapolis, I mean, you can see the red-blue divide in stark contrast from J.D. Vance's comments yesterday and the ongoing comments from Governor Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. They're miles apart, and this is, we've talked about these issues a lot. This is nothing new, Brian, but it stems from before Trump, when these cities, which declared themselves sanctuary cities, they did not want ICE, they did not want any immigration enforcement in these cities. They protected illegal immigrants long before Trump came into office, and now those policies and the debate over them are coming to a head in an all too tragic way.
And by the way, these guys don't look like illegal immigrants. These guys look like they came from Scandinavia 150 years ago. So we're the legal immigrants. So they're protecting them, and now they're like typical Democratic cities telling their kids go to school remote. They just love shutting down schools. Why would you keep a fifth grader out of school because your anti-ICE protests are causing havoc in the streets?
Well, and Brian, Minneapolis was somewhat of the epicenter of a lot of the worst left-wing policies stemming from COVID, from school closures to the George Floyd riots, and how, in fact, Walz and Frey were actually at odds with each other for a long time because of the lack of planning, the lack of security, the lack of the aftermath of the chaos in Minneapolis, just the lack of order in the Minneapolis area. So this is a stain on the Walz and Frey records. They don't have a whole lot of political standing to go on, and look, I think everyone's pouring fuel into the fire. I think we could use some calmer heads to declare this was a real tragedy what happened Wednesday, that we need law enforcement, we need immigration enforcement to deal with people who are criminals and are here illegally in the country, but we also need to have some middle ground where you have law enforcement, you have immigration enforcement, and you don't have elected leaders, impugning, tragedies and also impugning the people who are trying to enforce the law.
Josh, we remember guys like James Carville and Axelrod said the worst phrase ever used in politics was defund the police. Defund the police. This is similar. This is target ICE. Who's ICE? Oh, there's this group from a terror group? No, they are Americans who have taken a sector of the community enforcing illegal immigration law, focusing on illegal immigrants, criminals, and millions of which came during an irresponsible previous 4 years. So now it's okay to spend your entire day trying to circumvent law enforcement in our country. And now the embarrassment of Minneapolis cops who are told at risk of losing your job, you better not help. I mean, that's like the Marines not helping the Army.
Yeah, I mean, this is I've never seen it. I mean, I think, you could go back a generation to see the divide between the federal government and the state officials and the state saying they're not going to help the federal government enforce the law. I mean, this is pretty unprecedented stuff. So that there is a sense of obstructionism when it comes to the Minnesota state government, the Minneapolis government. This is like we've been saying, this is a government that has not shown any degree of competence in dealing with management of the city. With Governor Walz having to not even couldn't run for re-election because of declining popularity, and not even handling the welfare fraud scandal in the state competently. So there's an issue of competence here. Like, everyone seems to be wanting to pour flames on the fire and attack the federal government, attack law enforcement and ICE, but there's a middle ground here which the state does not seem to be wanting to take.
All right, so who is this woman that lost her life tragically? Who's this mom of three, including a 6-year-old? So let's take a look. Well, we first off, here's what J.D. Vance said, and this got me intrigued. Cut 10.
First of all, the Department of Justice is going to investigate this. The Department of Homeland Security is already investigating this. But the simple fact is, what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who is trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy, while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left, who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe, against our law enforcement officers.
I'm not saying by any means that she should have been shot or died or whatever. I mean, let them work that out. You know, they got enough video angles. Let the experts work that out. If you have to lawyer up, you could debate that. I will say that plowing the ground and for this to happen has been Pritzker, the mayor, the horrible mayor in Chicago, the horrible mayor, the failed mayor in Minneapolis, and the governor there, as well as what's happening in Portland. But let's find out more about Renee Good. Well, we know that she and her partner were so angry that Trump got elected, they fled to Canada. Then they realized Canada sucks, and they came back to Minneapolis, at which time she signed her 6-year-old to the Southside Family Charter School, which we understand is a woke charter school, which boasts of social justice training for children, at which time she meets like-minded people and becomes a warrior and member of Ice Watch. And she becomes a warrior leader for them, at which time she was all over town and has been doing whatever she can to circumvent ICE. People said they saw her earlier in that day doing these moves, but was trained in anti-ICE activities, what you can do, how to block them, how to circumvent them. This is no poetry writer, no poet from Colorado. I mean, she might like poetry, but her job was being an activist, anti-ICE activist. People should start portraying this accurately.
Yeah, so I think I read that same New York Post story, which was
and the Daily Mail.
I mean, look, there's been a lot. I mean, I'm a big believer in getting the facts out.
And by the way, Fox News confirmed it. By the way, Fox News has confirmed it about an hour ago.
So there's a lot of details coming. I mean, part of the problem I've had in the last couple of days is that government officials are speaking without knowing all of the facts. I think that Fox story, New York Post story, really does add a little bit more detail about the background of the victim, that she was indeed an anti-ICE protester. Now that doesn't, there's also the fact of the situation on the ground, which I think Tom Homan, the head of ICE, said it best in the immediate aftermath of what happened, which is that we need to have an investigation. I can't comment until all of the facts come out. I think the vice president could have been wise to maybe, bite his tongue a little bit and wait for these investigations to take place, whether the use of force was justified. These are very, this requires a lot of reporting, a lot of attention to detail, and there are a lot of things we don't know right now. So I think like cooler heads should prevail when it comes to government officials and politicians. We obviously haven't seen that, but now that we are learning facts, we are learning details. That you are hearing on the left that this was someone who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's clearly not the case. This is someone whose background is pretty well documented as an anti-ICE activist and a true believer. Now, that's separate from what actually happened on Wednesday and who was justified and whatnot, but she clearly seemed to be blocking the ICE enforcement operation taking place in Minneapolis, and her background seems to underscore that fact.
All right, let's talk about Venezuela. The president's going to be meeting with oil executives, making it clear, look, we don't want to run that country. We don't want to pay municipalities. We don't want to pick up the garbage. So they're leaving the current government in place for now. They're going to meet with the Democratic opponent that actually won the last election later this week, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. But I think it's also important to point out that I think the president has a very smart move. He's going to use the threat of their one and only commodity, their main commodity, oil, going to control it, mine it, modernize it, allow that country to be rich again. But if anything goes sideways, we are in control of it. That's going to be his approach. But they need American oil companies to commit. I don't know what they're going to say today, but the CEO of the American Energy Institute, Jason Isaac, joined us earlier. Cut 23.
Again, they lost billions of dollars in investments when the regime stole those assets. They stole those leases. They stole private property of shareholders in the United States that are pension fund holders. It's teachers, it's firefighters, it's first responders who had entrusted their investments in these pensions, who then invested in Venezuela to have it stolen. So hopefully we can get that private property back into the shareholders' hands of these companies, and they can actually get a return on investment.
Cut 22.
But I will tell you, the smaller independents that I represent in the Permian Basin, where I'll be later today, are already feeling the pinch of below $60 barrel of oil. I don't think costs can go down much more at the pump unless you get rid of things like these climate nuisance lawsuits that these companies are having to defend themselves against. Cities like Boulder and states like Louisiana that are attacking our American oil and gas companies, when those should be set at the federal level, not at the state or local level.
And as you think when Exxon, Chevron, Conoco sit down with the president, they're going to commit to the billions needed to modernize their oil output?
Well, look, it's going to be an important conversation. I think the big concern from the oil executives is what is the state of governance going to be like in Venezuela? Because right now you still have Maduro's henchman, the former vice president, now leader Delcy Rodriguez, in charge with a lot of pretty authoritarian and extreme leaders that were part of the Maduro regime. And for the safety of oil employees to come back into the country, I don't know if the current level of governance is going to be something that they'd be amenable to. I think there are a lot of steps that would need to take place before you see kind of that. And it takes Brian, it takes a while, to get the oil out of the ground and to actually develop the infrastructure and the resources necessary to kind of get that oil into market. It isn't going to be something that happens overnight. It's going to take years, if not longer. So I think the biggest challenge, though, is the state of governance in Venezuela. The assumption immediately after the ouster of Maduro was that there could be a pathway to elections in a democratic regime. We've seen a lot of Machado, the Democratic opposition leader. She's meeting with the president apparently in the coming days. So we'll see where that goes. But as long as you have a dictator who's pretty much the same, has the same mentality as Maduro, I don't know how receptive the oil executives are going to be to rushing back in the country until there is.
I think the military presence that will remain, maybe not at this level, is going to be the insurance. And knowing that if they lose the oil, they lose all their revenue. It seems to have worked so far. They just have hundreds of political prisoners just let out. And that's encouraging. You know who gets it? Colombia's president, who astonishingly picked up the phone and talked to the president. And we see Brazil now decided to lessen Bolsonaro's prison sentence from 27 to 2 years. That's exactly it. If they let it, and which, by the way, you can go down because President Trump said, as long as you put him in prison, we're going to hit you with huge tariffs. So I think somehow they're getting the message. Real quick, do you want to weigh in, Josh, on the jobs numbers? I don't know if you've seen them. They just came in. They added 50,000, slightly less than expected. Unemployment dropped to 4.4%. So the market seems to be happy with that. They're not unhappy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I just saw the headlines. It does seem to be a status quo economic report, but waiting to see a little more of the data. But look, we're in sort of this weird holding period where inflation's a little bit higher than we'd like, but not as high as it was during the Biden years. That when you actually look at people's individual economic circumstances, they're actually feeling better than how they feel about the overall state of the economy. So, I think there's a lot of volatility. The affordability message is something Democrats are trying to run with. I mean, the reality is, when you look historically in the last, 20, 30 years, the economy is objectively in better shape than it's been throughout a lot of periods during that time. But people are not feeling it, and I think a lot of that is on Trump's hands over the next year to get that message out, and also to make the sell on the provisions of the big beautiful bill. That this is supposed to fuel economic growth. This is something that the tax cuts and a lot of the permanence of the tax cuts. That's something that needs to be rallied home by Republicans and by the White House if they want to make that sale.
All right, go get them. Thanks so much, Josh. Appreciate it. Hey, we are back, and Tomi Lahren is here. I said, oh, isn't it great you came in just for me? She said, no, well, I'm doing the big weekend show. It's 8 hours. She's from 5 until whenever she's done, Saturday and Sunday. Oh, then I'm doing Outnumbered. And so it is, but you are doing One Nation Sunday at 10.
Yes.
So you're gonna dominate the weekends. Are you prepared for that?
Well, we're going to both dominate the weekend.
Right.
You know, we're going to do big weekend, then we're going to pass it off to you, and then I'm going to see you again. So all is well.
Well, who do you pass it off to? You pass it off to Mark Levin,
yes.
right? Okay.
But then after that, we pass it off to you. I mean, really?
No, there's Trey Gowdy.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
and then it's me.
It's close enough.
And then it'll be you. And then last week we went live. We were going to go live anyway, but the Venezuela thing just rocked everything. What was it like when it became clear that was going to be the weekend, like that this was happening?
Mm-hmm. Well, we did 4 hours on Saturday as opposed to our normal 3 due to the coverage, but, breaking news. And now since then we've had, 5 more breaking news stories. So it feels like that is the distant past from everything we've got this week.
So here's what happened in Portland last night. It looks like we don't have a lot of answers, but 2 people associated with the TDA, the evil Venezuelan gang, and ICE had a confrontation. They were shot. Here's the mayor, Keith Wilson, cut 1.
Our community deserves answers. Our community deserves accountability. And most of all, our community deserves peace. Earlier today, I spoke with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. We shared not just our concerns, but our grief for the families who are suffering and grief for the recklessness of our federal government.
Right, recklessness of our federal government. Tomi, this is so unbelievable that these idiots are running these cities into the ground. ICE is in there, and they decide ICE is the problem. And that's been the theme almost now for 10 months.
It's been the theme for a decade, really.
Right.
Well, they're trying to recreate 2020 because 2020 was the heyday for the leftists and the Democrats in this country. They did everything that they wanted. They had COVID, they had George Floyd, they had BLM riots, they had the Summer of Love. They want the winter of love, and they want a distraction from the fraud that's being uncovered. It might be in Minnesota now where the focus is, but all of these leaders of all of these cities and states know it's coming to a city and state near them, so they have to deflect and they have to distract. They need a scapegoat. It's going to be ICE. A lot of their constituents already hate ICE, so it's easy. But this is all just to distract from probably the massive fraud going on in every one of these states.
So when we look over at Minneapolis, we've already watched that Jacob Frey, which you would think the people of Minneapolis would have woken up, saw their whole city burned to the ground, the police station taken over, saw what an embarrassment he was, and stopped reelecting him. But I guess the alternative was an inexperienced Somali.
Yeah. So that is the problem with all of these deep blue cities and states that only have blue choices. You either get incredible fringe so far off the cliff, like Fatah or whatever that guy's name was in Minneapolis, or you have Jacob Frey that's almost over the cliff but not quite, and then he gets to purport as the moderate, and then they still get a radical, but it's not as bad as it could have been.
Right.
And that's what you have in these deep blue cities. No good choices.
I hear you. And so we're going to see what's happening. We see more, I guess, riots in Minneapolis today because the governor wants that, and he wants a moment of silence too. And once again, keep kids out of the schools.
Yeah.
Let's shut the kids down. It's too dangerous. It's too dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Do you think ICE is coming in to get your 5th grader? I'm pretty sure they're going to be okay. They have not learned anything from the pandemic.
Or is it so that the teachers can get out on the streets and protest?
Wow.
That's what I think this is really about. And they have their day of, what do they call it? Their day of unity or whatever. No, it's a day to get out there and to mobilize. And we know that the leftist foot soldiers often find themselves as members of the teachers union. So I think this is even less about the kids in schools and more about giving a pass to some of these far left educators to get out on the streets.
Well, I think the one I did not know, as we find out more and more, thanks to our reporting, Fox News, Alexis McAdams, Daily Mail, and New York Post, we find out that the woman that was shot and killed tragically, no one thinks she should have died or got shot, but the way she acted led to this whole incident. For example, if you stood on the side with a piece of oak tag and yelled against Trump, you're going to be fine. That's what a lot of people are very happy doing. That might be their job. I don't know. But now we find out the woman who is described as a kind soul and a great poet, turns out that she is her and her wife were seen screaming at the ICE agents. Turns out that she was so against Trump, she and her wife went to Canada, rather after Trump won the election because they didn't want to live here, only to come back to Minneapolis, comes to Minneapolis and finds a woke charter school where they teach activism to the children, including her 6-year-old, and where she met other parents. They got her involved as a warrior against ICE. And she got trained to go against ICE to do exactly what she's doing.
Well, you have to ask yourself, why would a young mother, why would she choose to spend her time instead of working to provide for her family, working to be a good mother, a good steward of the community? Why would she spend her time going out harassing, stalking, assaulting, ramming ICE agents? Why would you spend your day or your time doing that if you are indeed just this individual who was taking their kids to school? No, you were out there. This is what you wanted to happen. You wanted a confrontation. And I see the cell phones, whether it's her wife recording or whoever else, they want to provoke some kind of an altercation. Now, did she bargain for it to go this far? I'm guessing probably not. But this is nothing new. We've seen this for the last decade. These provocateurs trying to get a reaction out of law enforcement, whether it's ICE, Border Patrol, or just your regular police officers, they want some kind of an altercation. They often want a lawsuit, and they want to foment more violence and more radical foot soldiers to take to the streets.
And I've said this before in this show, so people listening saying, why are you repeating it? But I want you do you remember that James Carville, David Axelrod, maybe Leon Panetta, like the more level-headed political strategists among the Democrats, said the stupidest phrase that they ever heard was defund the police. And they would, Joe Biden said, I never said that. Everyone's like, besides Cory Bush, nobody would say that they said it. Do you realize going against ICE is really worse than going against police? I mean, do they realize what they're saying? Do they know that ICE, terrorists, these are everyday Americans who go through a specific training in order to get the worst of the worst out? They are immigration law enforcement. So do they realize what they're saying, and do the American people understand who they are?
The American people do, but I think there's a much bigger question here, much more at play. These Democrat politicians have to defend these immigrant communities with everything that they have, because you see a lot of follow the money, right? So a lot of these people, a lot of these politicians taking money from groups that are involved in fraud. So it's whether it's loosely connected or directly connected, you're not only losing your constituents, your voting base, which a lot of these Democrats depend on these voting bases in their various states, especially Minnesota. The Somali community makes up about 2% of the population, but they vote almost exclusively Democrat. So you can't lose them. So I think these Democrats are also trying to fight for their lives. They're fighting for their immigrant communities, their illegal immigrant communities, because those are their constituents. And in some cases, those are their financial backers. So this is about more than just protecting their neighbors. This is about their very power and livelihood at stake.
How comfortable, it amazes me how comfortable Democrats are comfortable looking at video and saying that ICE agent is a murderer, including Mayor Mamdani. There was a hope that I had that he wouldn't be as nearly as bad as he was as a candidate in his beliefs. But listen to him yesterday. I know you're laughing at me. Cut 11.
That was the conclusion I came to just in watching that video. And I think that many Americans came to that same conclusion. No matter how many times this is mischaracterized by others, we will see right what is in front of us, which is that a 37-year-old woman was killed by an ICE agent, and she leaves behind children, she leaves behind her family, she leaves behind an entire community and a city that will mourn her. And this is something that was entirely preventable. And it is yet, however, unsurprising to see from an agency that is both reckless and also operates with a real sense of impunity across the country.
And the question was, you called him a murderer. And you just decide you have to not only weigh in, but weigh in quickly. He called the president hours after the Venezuelan attack to register his displeasure with the military move. Have you ever seen such arrogance?
Yeah, the Democrat Party has been, going with this narrative for quite a while. But Mamdani, I don't know why anybody's surprised.
A week.
I know, but why is anybody surprised? When you say, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. Why would anybody be surprised that Mamdani is doing this? Why would anybody be surprised that almost every single, if not every single appointee that he has made has had to delete tweets, apologize for tweets, or step down for their social media behavior or other behavior? Every single one, if I'm not mistaken. They've had to apologize for something. Yeah. None of these people have a clean rap sheet, whether it's in the court of public opinion or the actual court. So why are we surprised that this guy is doing exactly what he said he was going to do? When Linda Sarsour said, the Democratic Socialists of America, they said, we got him elected and we're going to make sure that he fulfills what we told him he must fulfill. They weren't lying. They weren't kidding. They weren't just throwing that out there for fun. They meant it, and he's doing it. And why are we surprised?
Well, I think that, too, so he's endorsing Dan Goldman's opponent. that guy Brad Lander, who's a socialist, against a sitting left-wing firebrand in Dane Goldman, who the governor, Democratic governor, and Senator Schumer are supporting. This, to me, if I'm running the DNC, I'm saying this is a 5-alarm fire, because you are dividing a party that, with all its people, will have trouble winning, let alone a divided party.
Well, what they see is, where is the energy at? Because
socialists,
because the moderates don't have energy.
They don't.
And so you have to be far left to get people to do anything, to get people to donate, to get people out on the streets, to get people with their pre-made signs all over cities and states across this country. You have to be far left. You have to be radical far left, because the moderates, although they could win, the swing states, which are actually important, they can't get attention on MS Now and CNN and all of these left-wing podcasts. They don't get the energy, they don't get the attention, they don't get the foot soldiers, so they're going to keep moving left.
So you're going to do our number at the top of the hour. Were you concerned that you weren't loose enough that it was the first game of the day and you were worried about pulling something? Do you feel as though you're loose enough to go do an hour show?
I'm ready to do it now.
You can?
I am.
Thank
now
goodness.
I've been trained and prepped by the best.
All right. Maybe there'll be a cold plunge you can go to.
There we go.
Until you're ready. And then I'll see you on One Nation Sunday.
See you Sunday.
And then we'll see you Saturday and Sunday.
Yep. See me all weekend.
So many plugs. Tomi Lahren, talk to you soon.
I'm not here to lose. I'm not here to show up. I'm here to win. Under the lights, in the arena, and I want to perform. I wanted to have a good opponent to set the stage for sure. They threw Colby, and I was like, let's show this boy who the real American is. If I don't work hard enough, I'm sure Colby could get the better of me. I stepped into a gym like this in Kill Cliff, and I test myself against the best young kids in the world, and I'm pretty sharp.
So there you go. Colby, the Colby they're referring to is Colby Covington. He is a mixed martial arts wrestler, but fundamentally he's a wrestler, former interim UFC welterweight champ. And like so many UFC guys, they're finding more and more they can go back and wrestle. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, they are loving it. He is going to be part of the Real American Freestyle event coming up Saturday in Miami. It's going to be the 190-pound match will be Colby Covington against Luke Rockhold, and that was him just talking. Colby, welcome back.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having me.
Just so happy with the success that this professional sport is now having, because everyone had so much respect for, at any level. When you're a wrestler, it takes so much discipline, whether you're a 500 wrestler in a Division II school or you end up being the best. You have to work so hard, and you're so on the line. You can't hide your weaknesses, and your opponent's going to be doing it, but they never had the pro opportunity. That seems to be happening. Before we talk about a match, you've had a few events under your belt. What do you think so far?
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, an amazing platform that Real American Freestyle has provided for these wrestlers. Back when I was in high school and college, if I wanted to go down this route of wrestling after college, it was like, hey, you want to go to the Olympics? Here's a hot dog. Here's a handshake. That's all you're going to get. So that's why I went down the UFC route, because it was an opportunity to financially change my future and change my family's future. So if they would have had Real American Freestyle when I was in college, I definitely would have done it. So I'm thankful for the opportunity, and it's going to be a good show for all the fans.
Was it hard going back to strictly wrestling? Do you ever get tempted to kick somebody in the face?
Definitely a couple of times I had to pull back some punches and elbows. I had to realize I'm not an MMA fighter. I got to go back to my true love, my first passion, which is freestyle wrestling.
So many wrestlers, like I did the play-by-play in two of them, and I was the first ever Octagon reporter. So I saw all Hoist Gracie and everything. So I saw all of it, and it became clear you need to know how to grapple. Like the karate guys were so out of their depth before there were weight classes and time limits. You knocked out, choked out is the way to do it. So, and it was unbelievable. So I watched a 180-pound guy take down all these other guys because they could grapple. That's what jiu-jitsu does. So how much was the UFC, before we get back to this, the transition easier? Because when in doubt, take them down.
Yeah, it was an easy transition, because not only the work ethic they teach you, you're up at 4 a.m. It just teaches you so much mental fortitude, so much discipline, so much sacrifice, and that translates well to UFC and MMA. So MMA was the easy transition because I remember my first day in the gym, I was training with one of the highest level Muay Thai fighters in the world. And he was like, Colby, man, I'm scared to like do my normal strikes and open up on you because I'm scared you're going to put me on my butt and take me down. So just having that fear element in a guy's mind that you might take them down, they're not able to open them up and do all their normal strikes. So it's a huge advantage to be a wrestler, and I think it's the best martial art you can have.
Is UFC okay with you doing? Obviously, they're okay with you doing this, right? UFC has been cooperative. I think they're intrigued by this.
Yeah, I think they're intrigued by it. You know, I had a call with Dana White, and he was completely open to me doing it. He's like, "Hey, they're not a competitor, so they're not another MMA organization. So this isn't a competition. So we're happy for you to go do that, make a little money on the side, and get back to your first love, wrestling."
So it's going to be coming up. I don't know what time you're actually going to be out there. I think the broadcast begins at 8 p.m. So, Colby, tell me about Luke Rockhold.
Yeah, Luke Rockhold, man, he's a killer. You know, he's a great athlete. You know, he's a former world champion. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer in the UFC. So he's wrestled with some of the best wrestlers of all time, with Daniel Cormier, Cain Velasquez, Khabib Nurmagomedov at AKA in San Jose. So, you know, it's going to be a great match. He's a bigger guy. He's a stronger guy, but, you know, I'm going to be a nastier guy on Saturday night.
And what do you weigh now? You're wrestling 190. When's the weigh-in?
Yeah, so the weigh-in, he had to push it. He couldn't make the 190 limit, so we got it at 200. So I weigh about 195 on my heaviest days. So he'll be the bigger guy, but you know that's not going to make a difference on Saturday night.
So you haven't competed, Colby. You're 37 now. You have not competed since losing to Joaquin Buckley in Tampa a year back. How do you feel about that? How hungry are you to get back in on the mat?
Yeah, I'm super hungry to get a full training camp. That fight I took on a week's notice. You know, everybody knows I was on the campaign trail with Donald Trump. You know, I was out there, you know, trying to save America. You know, I was in New York, I was here, I was there, and then UFC calls me on 1 week's notice to take that fight. So that wasn't indicative of the fighter that I am. I'm excited that Real American Freestyle gave me a full training camp. I've had 12 weeks to refine my skills in the freestyle wrestling art, and I'm going to put on the best performance of my career Saturday night only on Fox Nation.
Right. So you come up 190. Do you know where you're going to be wrestling on the card? Do they do it by weights?
I mean, I'm Mr. Main Event, man. I'm the first and only fighter to go to the White House. You know, when they put my name on the marquee, it sells tickets, it gets asses in seats, and you know, I'm one of the highest gates in Madison Square Garden history. So Amerant Bank Arena is going to be fired up on Saturday night.
It's going to be sold out. I mean, that's a hotbed too. I know Pennsylvania was really hot, and Tampa. But let's talk about the actual the match. I'm wondering, Colby, would you go back? Are you going to be at the White House wrestling in the fighting in the octagon?
Yeah, that's the plan. You know, is to use these couple matches in Real American Freestyle as my training camp, and then hopefully getting on the White House card and fighting on the South Lawn in June for Donald Trump.
What was it like on the trail?
It was amazing, man. I was so humbled that, you know, the administration allowed me to come to all the different stops. You know, I was in New York, I was in, you know, North Carolina, I was in Florida, I was in all these different stops that they had. And it was just, I was so grateful. You know, I was in owner's suites, I was backstage with the team, all the big guys in the administration, and, you know, just grateful. Just a kid that came from Oregon, and all I've done my whole life is wrestle and fight, to be, you know, on one of the biggest political moments in history. It's truly humbling.
You know, it's interesting is the way a lot of Trump supporters are UFC and wrestling fans. Do you see how he was greeted? I think it was 2 years ago, now a year and a half ago, at the NCAA finals in Pennsylvania. Can you give me an idea of how that is? You know, obviously gets 50% of the vote. There's a lot of people that didn't vote for him. But when it comes to the combat sports, when it comes to wrestling and UFC, there seems to be very few non-supporters.
Yeah, you know, the wrestling in the UFC world, you know, it's a bunch of blue-collar, hardworking people and a bunch of fighters. You know, wrestling is a fight as well. So, you know, they see a fighter in Donald Trump, a guy that didn't give up, you know, through all the indictments, through all the smear campaigns. He kept fighting for America. He's not doing it for himself. He's the first president in history where his net worth went down after being in office. So he's doing it for the people. He's doing it for America first. And that's why we all identify with Donald Trump.
All right, 37. You know, you're an NCAA champ. You obviously had all the success. You couldn't, you know, you want to make a living, so you go UFC. Got it. So at 37, very few wrestlers could I have ever asked this, even 3 years ago. At 37, how different are you from when you were 27 or 22?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot different, but you just have to train smarter, not harder. When I was 27, I just trained as hard as I could. I trained 4 or 5 times a day. Now it's, taking body maintenance days, getting massages, relaxing, recovery massages. But, the thing now that I have at 37 is a mental strength that I didn't have when I was 27. So I'm more mature. So, I feel confident. I feel better than I've ever felt in my competitive career. And Saturday night in Amerant Bank Arena, I'm going to turn up.
All right. And is that for a title?
No, it's not for the title, but it'll put us in line. The winner will be next for the title for Real American Freestyle.
And what people should understand too, Colby, is this is global. You got people they're coming in from Russia. They're coming in from, in Iran, they want to come over, although they think they got their hands full. These wrestling nations. So this is an immediate global attraction.
Yeah, it's an amazing platform that Real American Freestyle has done, and they brought in some of the best wrestlers around the world. So this is an exciting time for the wrestling world. It's an opportunity for guys to finally make some money and make a better living for themselves. So, of course, that's got the global attention. And Saturday night, all eyes on Real American Freestyle 5.
Yeah, and I tell you, almost all these different entities want a piece of it. It's been an unbelievable success, one of the most successful launches of professional sports that I can remember since the UFC, which had some rocky years. Colby headlining. He's going to be with Real American Freestyle, Fox Nation, 8 o'clock Eastern time at the 190 pounds. Colby, it's going to be a great card. I know you enjoy it. The wrestlers really respect each other, so you like the camaraderie. The broadcast is excellent. So if you don't have Fox Nation, this is the reason to get it. So watch Fox Nation. They have it exclusively beginning at 8 o'clock. It's a fantastic production as well as great fights. Colby, thanks so much. Best of luck. I hope you win.
Thanks for your time, Brian. Have a great day.
You got it.